time I've seen the city, I was totally blown out.
Oh.
How difficult is to like make such a huge scale thing as a night city? How even possible it is?
That's a great question. Basically, when you think about how to create this kind of city, you always, well, if you want to go into the game design perspective, so basically you have to think about the overall, how big is the city, how many streets you want to have there, what kind of buildings you can have, how many buildings you can enter, how many buildings have how many different floors, right? And then you divide this city into the districts. And because you also want to have unique districts, right? You want to have a variety of them, right? So currently in the game we have 6 districts, and all of those districts have a certain different aspects to them. The district you saw the demo, the Watson, it's one of those districts. It's largely a trade area where you can basically buy anything, see anything, talk to people, or even, you know, for example, the mega building, which you saw in the demo, is a multi-stories, super huge building. It's basically almost a living, breathing ecosystem, you know, that actually is self-sustainable when it comes to what you can do it. Because, you know, you got the gym there, you got the gun range, you got plenty of different vendors there. And so when approaching from design perspective, when you're approaching creating a city as big as this, you're again start super from high level of what the city is, and when it comes to like what the city is we always use the Mike Pondsmith Cyberpunk 2020 pen and paper role-playing game as our main inspiration, and we use that to think about, okay, so Night City, we know it's a super dark place, it's a super brutal city where with a huge disparity on a social ladder, because on the top of it you got mega corporations who rule from the top, and on the bottom of the ladder you got psycho gangs who are oppressing everyone from the bottom up, and there's everyone else in between. And in the game you're playing as a V, as a mercenary, a cyberpunk who is trying to find his own way through that dark city.
I can imagine that you worked on a Witcher project as well.
Yeah, I work on The Witcher and both expansions. Yeah.
So, are there any things the team learned into like making such a scale, big city from, I don't know, Novigrad or something?
When it comes to pipeline of how we changed approaching design a city as this, is that we introduced prefabs, which is in a very big short way of thinking about it, is a modular way of creating parts of the city. So let's say you have a room like this, right? So we know the rooms have walls, the floor, maybe some table, maybe some chairs, or usually chairs. And basically we're using that element as a founding block, which you can then populate throughout the city, and then manually adjust every single object that is there to make it really connected to the world.
The big part of the game will be cinematic, of course. How many hours you have cinematics in a game, and how difficult it was like producing them?
Oh, I can't give you any precise numbers, simply we didn't count it yet. But when it comes to the difficulty, I mean, going back to your questions about the world, right? You gotta think. The way we think about it is that, you know, in The Witcher we had the open world, and on the other hand, the narrative experience of the story, and the game is, you know, heavily story-driven, right? And so for The Witcher, we smashed those two together, right? And that's how we started to think about making this kind of game. So for Cyberpunk, we are doing the same smooshing, and then we are coding it all up in something we call interactive scene system. So interactive scene system, as you saw in the demo, is our way to keep the player as immersed in the game as possible. That's why we are trying to limit the amounts of cuts into the cutscenes as much as possible.
Is it even possible to tell me how many like levels of interactions are in the game? Because, you know, it can't be.
Oh, that's interesting.
It can't be unlimited, of course.
Of course. I mean, yeah, but simply because what we are aiming to do is still tell a very personal story. It's a story of V, of Cyberpunk, who's at the beginning of his or her journey through the Night City, right? And what is important for us is to create this still cinematic experience when you as a player will be able to enjoy the story you want to tell. So obviously it is a balance of sorts to decide, okay, so with this guy in this place, you can actually talk, maybe convince him to give you something, or maybe it's not, but basically you will have very specific story-heavy elements, and that's how we are thinking about dividing the content between the open world, classical AI crowd systems, and obviously the story-driven elements.
So what was your feelings when you saw your work, like set to the game, and you saw it with your colleagues, and then speak about what did you feel?
The biggest idea about our work, our process of creating this kind of work, is that we heavily rely on iteration. So we're never like, whenever we do something, we always take that and always try to look at it from different sides, from different angles, and then we're talking within our group and thinking about how do we make it better? Like, how does that make us feel? Is everyone on board with that? And then we iterate on that, and then we look at it again, and we iterate. So this is a process which is constant. Like, this process is never ending, and I think that's our true it's our true approach to creating a game. That's when one of the reasons we don't use procedural elements in the creation of the Night City is that we truly believe that in order to get the quality we want, everything has to be handcrafted, and it's exactly the same approach to animation. Yeah.
Is there any specific thing you can, of course, name in this state of development? You said it has to be in the game. This one little thing. Is there anything?
Yeah, there is one little thing. Like, just from my personal perspective, it's all about emotions. Because I truly believe, like, if you aim to tell different stories, but yet personal, because you might have characters who have very high-level pursuit goals. At the bottom, there's their need, and for such a person, this would be greed, right? And what I really hope for that we'll be able to tell you is how we are going to translate those emotions during conversations. Next challenge is actually using the facial animation combined with lip sync generation to keep the emotions going. Because for the open world RPG, this is one of the biggest challenges, to actually communicate with the player about that particular person's emotions while she's talking. It's very easy if she's not talking, because then you can rely 100% on the created animation. But if he's actually talking and getting angry at you, or even talking through their teeth, that is something that is a great chance to have, and I cannot wait to show you what I have.